Welcome to our true crime channel. Today we've got a gripping and unsettling tale that will pull you into the dark depths of real criminality. We're diving into the story of Derek LaRoche, a young man who seemed like your average nice guy on the outside, but harbored some chilling secrets within. The 1980s were a time of change in Canada, sparking conversations around safety and protective measures for young women. But amid this, Vancouver was experiencing horrific events. Derek began his hunt for vulnerable girls, using his charm to manipulate them. He convinced his victims that they could help him, only to strike with cold, calculated brutality. Why did his crimes go unnoticed for so long? What factors fueled his aggression? We'll explore Derek's psyche, his manipulative tactics, and the broader societal impacts. Let's discuss how such crimes can alter perceptions of safety in cities and affect future generations. Join us as we analyze this disturbing case, a significant chapter in Canadian criminal history. Derek LaRoche was born in 1960 in Vancouver, Canada, into what seemed like a perfect family. His father, a successful physician, and his mother, a college professor, created an image of prosperity. However, behind closed doors, their home was filled with tension and conflict. His father had sky-high expectations, imposing strict control and relentless criticism, making every failure feel catastrophic. This pressure instilled in Derek the belief that his worth was tied to his achievements, leaving scars on his psyche. From an early age, Derek displayed a penchant for manipulation and deceit. He could charm his peers but turned aggressive when faced with disapproval or defiance. Instead of learning to cope with challenges constructively, he grasped the lesson that control could be achieved through fear and manipulation. These traits began shaping his identity. In school, Derek stood out from his classmates. Although his interests veered towards darker themes: crime, violence, and human psychology. He immersed himself in true crime literature and manipulative techniques, delving into the murky depths of human nature. Family issues worsened his internal struggles. Every quarrel between his parents and every dissatisfaction contributed to his belief that love and acceptance hinged on success. Over time, he accumulated feelings of resentment and hatred towards others, culminating in the desire to eliminate those who didn't meet his expectations. As he matured, Derek began exhibiting psychopathic tendencies, a lack of empathy, and a desire to control others. After graduating high school in 1978, Derek enrolled in a local college, but his performance was inconsistent. He frequently skipped classes and evaded responsibility, intensifying his internal conflicts. During this period, he became more inventive in his manipulation, even with teachers, allowing him to secure higher grades with minimal effort. As the early 1980s rolled in, Derek's mental state deteriorated further. He developed an inflated self-image paired with an extremely low level of empathy. Less attuned to others' emotions, he fell into a vicious cycle. His disappointment in people only deepened his desire to control their lives. By early 1982, his behavior grew increasingly aggressive. Derek LaRoche's story symbolizes the invisible evil that can slip into the mundane fabric of everyday life. His choice of victims reflected his inner struggles and his desire to dominate those he perceived as weak. At the same time, public concern was mounting. Reports began surfacing of mysterious disappearances of girls, fueling a climate of fear in Vancouver. Society came to realize that beneath the ordinary surface lurked something much more sinister. Derek LaRoche became a figure referenced in discussions of psychopathy and criminal investigations, prompting debates about the complexities of identifying and preventing serial killers. His actions were studied as examples of psychological dysfunction and social alienation, while his victims became symbols of vulnerability, highlighting societal weaknesses. The early years of Derek LaRoche laid the groundwork for his worldview and behavioral patterns, leading to the horrific consequences that shook the city and forever changed residents' perceptions of safety. From the early 1980s, Vancouver entered a troubling chapter marked by an unprecedented surge in crime. Derek LaRoche, who had previously gone unnoticed in the daily bustle, became the catalyst for a series of horrifying offenses, starting with assaults and escalating to brutal murders. His actions cast a long shadow over the community, intensifying fear and uncertainty among its residents. The first victim, Linda Campbell, was a 19-year-old medical student known for her optimism and kindness. Always ready to lend a helping hand, she worked part-time at a cafe, engaging closely with customers and participating in charity events aimed at improving the world. Linda's dream of becoming a doctor garnered admiration from peers and professors alike, but her desire to help also made her vulnerable. Her first assault occurred as she returned home from school. Feeling confident, she inadvertently neglected safety precautions. When Derek approached her, he presented himself as a caring stranger in need of assistance. He quickly exploited her goodwill, shattering her sense of safety and trust. The situation with Catherine unfolded similarly. She encountered Derek while walking home from an evening class where he manipulated her emotions and transformed her trusting nature into that of a victim. Catherine Smith, 21 years old and an aspiring architect, became the second victim. Known for her beauty and talent, she was passionate about her work, often staying late at university to finish projects. Her ambition, however, made her more susceptible to manipulation. While she appeared confident, she frequently felt isolated, away from family and friends who could offer support. Derek noticed Catherine during one of her late-night study sessions and decided she would be his next target. When the building was nearly empty, he approached her under the pretext of being interested in her project, appearing friendly and engaged to win her trust. Unaware of his true intentions, Catherine willingly began explaining her work. They agreed to take a stroll in a nearby park, and as she focused on her materials, Derek abruptly changed his demeanor. He attacked her when she was least prepared, using brute force to silence her and pinning her near a tree. It happened so quickly that Catherine couldn't comprehend the situation until it was too late. He threatened to kill her if she told anyone about the assault. The third victim, Michelle Adams, was a 20-year-old aspiring fashion designer, known for her keen sense of style, which caught the eyes of those around her. With a cheerful attitude, she dreamt of walking in fashion shows. Her fleeting successes on the runway gave her confidence, but also created pressure to work even harder. Her outgoing nature made her an easy target, leading her to an encounter with Derek, who skillfully fostered a false sense of trust. Derek spotted Michelle while shopping at a popular clothing store where she worked. Presenting himself as a fashion enthusiast eager to hear her opinions, he engaged her in conversation. After their chat, he suggested they grab coffee to discuss her dreams of becoming a designer. Thinking they were forming a friendship, Michelle unsuspectingly invited him to her home. However, once they were alone, Derek abruptly transformed from a friendly companion to an aggressor, abusing her trust to launch an attack. He overpowered her without consent and issued threats if she dared to speak out. Ultimately, all three women suffered sexual violence but fortunately survived. These incidents served as alarming warnings for local authorities, residents, and the justice system, indicating that something was profoundly wrong in the city. Initially, none of the women reported these crimes. However, starting with the fourth victim, Derek escalated his brutality. He took the life of Charlie Huang, a 22-year-old nurse, known for her empathy toward patients. She was beloved for her willingness to help and her desire to brighten the hard days of those she cared for. Yet, she too harbored a darker desire for success and validation, making her vulnerable to manipulation. Julia Winters, 19, and Veronica Lopez, 21, also fell prey to Derek. They were peers of Charlie and frequently crossed paths with her at university. Both worked in service jobs to make ends meet while dreaming about graduation. Their lives, full of hope and plans, spiraled into despair due to unprovoked violence. With each new crime, Derek's audacity grew. His approaches ranged from cunning deception to outright attacks, meticulously refined over weeks. He meticulously studied victim behaviors and police reports, honing his manipulative methods. Initially relying on charm to gain trust, he swiftly reverted to physical force. The assaults took place in secluded locations like alleys and parks where he could remain undetected. As Derek's confidence and brutality climbed, he began murdering his victims. He employed choking methods, mercilessly beating them into submission before ultimately killing them. Each act was premeditated, and whenever someone failed to meet his expectations, he ruthlessly retaliated. He often used shoelaces or cords to cover his tracks, ensuring he left no evidence behind. His carefully crafted actions emphasized his obsession with control and power. Derek's manipulative techniques became increasingly effective as he mastered the art of persuasion, intuitively knowing how to inspire trust. He studied the behaviors of his victims and their surroundings, approaching them with calculated caution. His charm and ability to read people made him a truly sinister adversary for every girl who fell within his sights. Derek LaRoche epitomized the archetypal manipulator with psychopathic traits. His charisma and confidence drew victims in, while his adaptability in social situations allowed him to gain trust rapidly. Possessing high emotional intelligence, he became a dangerous foe, accurately discerning and exploiting the emotions of others. Unlike most individuals, he operated with diminished empathy, granting him the capacity to commit heinous acts without remorse. The planning process behind his crimes showcased a high level of intelligence and cold calculation. Derek meticulously considered every detail from victim selection to manipulation strategies, granting him a sense of control and power. After each crime, he didn't just feel satisfaction from achieving his goals, he experienced a profound euphoria. For him, this was a game, a twisted delight in his victories. He felt no guilt or compassion. Instead, he was filled with a sense of triumph and strength. Following his murders, Derek occasionally experienced fleeting moments of satisfaction and even pride in his deeds. In his mind, he crafted an image of himself as an invincible predator, controlling his victims right up to the end. This feeling of power fostered an illusion of invulnerability, driving him toward new attacks. To Derek, each successful termination of a life validated his superiority and further propelled his plans. However, over time, despite the initial feeling of triumph, a slight unease began to creep in. Subconscious fears about potential consequences, such as arrest or exposure, sometimes weighed on him. Yet he quickly silenced these thoughts, clinging to his misguided belief that he could always evade punishment. This internal conflict further highlighted his instability as a person and intensified his compulsion to control every situation. The investigation into the disappearances and assaults of young women in Vancouver commenced in late fall 1982, just weeks after the remains of Charlie Huang, a resident of the Chinatown area, were found in Vancouver Creek Park. Her body was discovered hidden among the bushes, sparking outrage and fear throughout the community. Charlie was seen as an exemplary student and activist, deeply engaged in social sciences. Her sudden disappearance and the discovery of her remains sent shockwaves through the public. Immediately following Charlie Huang's body discovery, the city police launched an active investigation. The initial days focused on gathering evidence and interviewing witnesses. Detectives questioned dozens of students and local residents to determine who might have seen her in the days leading up to her disappearance. Media outreach helped gather additional information, with police placing photographs of Charlie in newspapers and on television, asking the community for any leads on her whereabouts. As it emerged that Charlie was not the first victim but part of a terrifying crime spree, the investigative team was restructured. A specialized task force was formed, consisting of experienced detectives, criminologists, and psychologists. Their primary goal was to establish connections between the cases and develop a profile of the potential perpetrator. At the same time, they began analyzing similar crimes in other cities to explore the possibility of a serial killer at work. Collecting evidence proved challenging. Crime scenes were disrupted by both intentional actions and natural elements, such as rain and strong winds characteristic of that time of year. Each new location of a victim left investigators with more questions than answers. This underscored the detectives' need to seek evidence beyond the park and surrounding streets. By then, reports of other missing women from similar neighborhoods had emerged, indicating a possible connection among the cases. Investigators started to form a profile of the potential serial offender. They closely examined victim behaviors, searched their workplaces, and conducted interviews with acquaintances and neighbors. This required a substantial amount of legwork, and every detail played a crucial role in uncovering connections. As the gloomy fall of 1982 unfolded, police sent letters to all universities and colleges in the area, warning students to remain vigilant. Such safety measures became standard protocol in all educational institutions. The police also organized nighttime patrols to alleviate anxiety and ensure the safety of local residents. This gathered intelligence helped investigators get closer to a suspect hiding among ordinary citizens. Their attention turned to several men with criminal histories and tendencies toward violence. Some were linked to the murders, sharpening the investigation's focus on a well-crafted and cold-blooded perpetrator. Ongoing communication between the police and the local community helped ease tensions, fostering a spirit of cooperation. At this stage, investigative teams were still uncertain about their progress, but everyone recognized that collecting additional evidence and uncovering valuable testimonies could significantly impact the case's trajectory in preventing amateurish missteps. During the investigation into the disappearances and murders of women, detectives placed emphasis on closely examining the crime scenes. At every stage, they documented any minutiae that could prove useful. They organized witness interviews, targeting those who might have seen Charlie and the other victims in their final moments. Investigators reached out to friends of the victims and residents of nearby areas, focusing on individuals who could provide information about any suspicious characters. Inquiries at local cafes and libraries, where victims often spent time with friends, yielded effective results. Each piece of information was logged into a comprehensive database, helping to create a clearer picture of events. One of the most critical steps was analyzing surveillance footage. The police began reaching out to local businesses and institutions to access recordings from universities, cafes, and shops where the victims might have been. By scrutinizing video, investigators searched for potential suspects, reviewing anyone who appeared near the victims at crucial times. This effort helped generate a list of suspects for further interrogation. Simultaneously, psychological profiling of the offender was developed within the police department. Experts in criminal psychology analyzed victim behavior to identify factors contributing to their attacks. They found that the victims were young, open, and trusting, traits that made them easy targets for manipulation. Psychologists concluded that the offender likely possessed strong social skills, and could easily build trust. This further supported the hypothesis that the attacker might be familiar with the victims or even within their social circles. During one witness interrogation, police gathered information about a suspicious man seen near all the victims. He was described as an attractive and charming young man with an unusual level of aggressiveness, piquing the interest of investigators. The police began to delve into his background and habits, considering the possibility that he might be a manipulator, using his charm to lure women. Criminal profiling allowed investigators to focus on a specific personality type, typically men aged between 25 and 35 who had experience interacting with women, particularly in educational or social environments. By this point, detectives had discerned common traits amongst the victims, indicating a possible link between the cases. Each victim was confident yet vulnerable in her circumstances, making them easy targets. As a result, the investigative team confirmed their suspicions about the manipulative nature of the perpetrator and painted a more detailed picture of his potential behavior and interaction methods with victims. This heightened the police's determination to continue searching for and analyzing evidence, critically assessing every step to avoid missing crucial information or losing the opportunity to catch the criminal. Based on the gathered intel, investigators began to refine the ideal suspect profile and decided to review surveillance footage across the city, focusing on his suspected behavior. Every move was documented, adding a new layer to the overarching investigation. Discussing the evidence, newly uncovered facts, and witness testimonies allowed the police to create a timeline of events that might lead them to the attacker. This coordinated effort expedited the case resolution process and ultimately provided a clearer picture of the criminal network that needed to be dismantled. With each new report, tension in the city escalated regarding the safety of young women. With the information collected, the investigation committee focused on likely suspects, with Derek LaRoche drawing particular attention. analyzing witness statements and gathered data, investigators launched an inquiry centered around his background, habits, and social circles. Derek, a 31-year-old Vancouver resident, had several run-ins with the law, including multiple instances of violence, making him a person of interest in the investigation. The initial step in the investigation was to examine Derek's criminal history. Police discovered that he had convictions for physical assault against women. These incidents, documented during his youth, were compiled in records forwarded to investigators. The files indicated that he had undergone psychiatric evaluations following his arrest for aggressive behavior, including harassment and intimidation. This information enabled detectives to conduct a preliminary series of interviews with Derek's previous acquaintances linked to his criminal tendencies. Investigators also analyzed his social connections. They interviewed neighbors and friends who could provide insights into his behavior and how he spent his free time. Notably, he was a frequent visitor to bars and clubs where he often met young women. These encounters left mixed impressions among the women. Some spoke of his charisma, while others noted his insistence and oddities, raising suspicions. Amidst all this data, Derek became a profiling subject. Criminologists confirmed he matched the description of a police composite sketch created based on Michelle Adams' testimony, a woman who had reported an assault. Her description closely aligned with Derek's traits: dark hair, tall build, and specific mannerisms. Investigators could not overlook this, as it fit the broader profile of the suspected criminal. As the investigation progressed, police employed methods to analyze all the collected material. Derek, in addition to his violent tendencies, frequently changed residences, complicating the tracking of his movements. Investigators closely examined his digital activity, including messages and social media interactions. Personal profiling indicated that Derek sought relationships with women, often becoming aggressive if rejected. Additionally, the investigative team traced his presence to multiple locations linked to the disappearances of the women. This triggered forensic work to analyze potential biological evidence, DNA, and hair found at the sites. Witness feedback on Derek's behavior, coupled with the existing evidence, urged investigators to interrogate him immediately and potentially apprehend him for further inquiry. The collected evidence and testimonies pointed toward a singular conclusion: Derek LaRocque was not only likely involved in the disappearances, but could also be the prime suspect. This renewed urgency to further investigate his movements and habits while developing plans for his arrest. Investigators understood the need for caution to avoid alerting the suspect and potentially missing crucial moments to gather evidence. They meticulously tracked his every step, leveraging all available resources to prevent another victim. After Derek LaRoche's arrest, the investigative team focused entirely on obtaining a confession from him. Recognizing that his confidence and tendency to deflect could work against him, they employed various pressure tactics during the interrogation. The questioning occurred in a specially designed police room, where detectives sat opposite the suspect, closely observing his behavior. Derek opened the interrogation with confident responses about his whereabouts during the days when the women vanished. He presented his narrative, insisting he was busy working and had nothing to do with the crimes. His calm tone and stoic expression projected an air of innocence, even as investigators presented facts suggesting his possible involvement. However, it didn't take long for his story to raise suspicions due to isolated details that he repeatedly mentioned. Having prepared questions regarding his connections to the victims, detectives were met with repeated denials from Derek about knowing them or any claims of prior meetings or interactions. Yet, by the end of the first segment of the interrogation, as his confident answers began to falter, the detectives shifted their strategy to delve into the evidence they had gathered, specifying the details uncovered at the crime scenes. When investigators presented DNA analysis results linked to the disappearance sites and noted matches with Derek's samples, his confidence visibly diminished. He started avoiding eye contact, rubbing his hands, and emphasizing details he had previously neglected. The nervous reaction intensified under the weight of the facts, prompting investigators to escalate the pressure. They began questioning Derek about his motives and reasons that could have driven him to commit the crimes. By the end of the interrogation, as one of the detectives broached his past, Derek displayed unmistakable signs of anxiety. His posture shifted, and he began to stutter. The building tension in the room led to him providing inconsistent answers to straightforward questions, further escalating the investigators' suspicions. After 3 hours of interrogation and realizing that standard techniques weren't yielding results, the investigators opted for a more open conversation, touching on themes of redemption and understanding. They created an atmosphere where Derek felt he could have a chance to explain his actions before anyone else did. In this context, he began to utter disjointed phrases that could be interpreted as a partial confession. This behavior surprised the investigative team. They noted that under the pressure and realization of his situation, Derek was gradually starting to crack. As his internal conflicts surfaced, he began to concede certain actions and candidly share his feelings, even if they were just fragmented thoughts. This moment became a turning point, confirming that the investigators were on the right track. They documented his words, which played a crucial role in the ongoing investigation and solidified their case against him. The trial of Derek LaRoche commenced a few months after his arrest. He faced numerous charges, including first-degree murder, abduction, and violence against women. The deputy prosecutor highlighted how abundant and clear the evidence was, including DNA found at crime scenes and witness testimonies, confirming his presence near the victims during critical periods. At the trial's opening, Derek's attorney asserted that his client was innocent and had been manipulated by the police, contending he had been coerced into providing contradictory statements. The defense sought to discredit the evidence, pointing to possible errors in the collection process and Derek's prior encounters with the law. The attorney argued that the lack of direct evidence linking Derek to specific crimes raised doubts about the legality of the charges. The court sessions unfolded through a standard process lasting several weeks. During each hearing, investigators presented collected evidence, including comparative DNA analysis, that confirmed biological materials found at the crime scenes matched samples taken from Derek. Witness testimonies from women who had previously been interviewed by detectives also contributed to painting a profile of the accused, with victims affirming the same manner of communication and behavioral style exhibited by Derek. A pivotal moment in the trial came with Michelle Adams' testimony, where she detailed her assault. She recounted how Derek initiated a conversation with her in a cafe she frequented and then followed her when she left. Her account became a crucial factor in building the criminal profile, reinforcing the charges based on preceding aggressive behaviors. Throughout the trial, Derek remained surprisingly calm and composed. In the courtroom, he often appeared unfazed. Although his movements sometimes betrayed him, he rubbed his palms, shifted in his seat, and avoided making eye contact with the witnesses. However, during the final session, when the prosecutor appealed to the court for the maximum sentence, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Finally, after lengthy deliberations and tense anticipation, the court delivered its verdict. Derek was found guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, shocking both his attorney and Derek himself. At the moment of the announcement, he momentarily trembled but quickly regained his composure. Derek's reaction to the sentence was restrained. He exhibited no overt emotional displays, although his gaze tightened. The courtroom was filled with victims and their families, who did not hide their relief and satisfaction with the outcome. As Derek was led out of the courtroom, he left behind a lingering silence, a sign of his realization of the inevitable loss of control over his life. The trial marked a significant moment in this story, highlighting not only the strength of the collected evidence, but also the importance of public opinion in combating crime. This case garnered heightened attention to the issue of violence in society and the urgent need for a more serious approach to women's safety. Derek LaRoche's situation served as both a warning to others and a symbol of hope for those who had endured similar horrors. Derek LaRoche's case, a serial killer who instilled fear in young women throughout Vancouver, significantly impacted societal perceptions of crime, particularly violence against women. As the details of the case became public, It sparked active dialogue surrounding women's safety and prompted calls for legislative change. One of the first effects of this case was a renewed focus on the legal framework governing the investigation and prosecution and violent crimes. Local authorities began to discuss the need for more stringent laws around offenders previously convicted of violence against women. Discussions led to several changes in laws concerning rehabilitation and conditions for release. A key proposal emerged for new legislation imposing stricter monitoring of individuals previously charged with violent behavior, including mandatory registration of such offenders. Moreover, LaRoche's case became a catalyst for programs aimed at preventing violence. Authorities initiated educational campaigns to raise awareness about the dangers of stranger behavior and how to identify potentially risky situations. These initiatives garnered support from both police and organizations working on women's rights. On a societal level, the case prompted significant shifts in perception. People became more vigilant regarding the behaviors of serial killers and the societal factors contributing to such criminality. An expansive discussion unfolded about how manipulators exploit their charm to lure victims and the necessity of trusting one's instincts regarding safety. Social media and the press empowered victims to share their stories, fostering a platform for discussing violence against women and ways to prevent it. As a result of widespread public discourse, initiatives aiming to improve safety in public places gained momentum in major cities. Bars, clubs, and other venues began implementing visitor control systems and staff training programs to recognize potentially dangerous behaviors. Local governments increased funding for police and social services to facilitate better collaboration with communities to enhance safety. In conclusion, the Derek LaRoche case shook the community and led to significant changes in legislation and societal attitudes toward violence. The public outcry, fueled by numerous media discussions, intensified campaigns advocating for women's rights and improved legislative initiatives. This case serves as a reminder of the importance of vigilance and proactive measures against violence, creating a safer environment for future generations. The attention drawn to violence and monitoring offenders played a vital role in fostering a more active civil society and establishing safety standards for both authorities and citizens alike. The crimes inflicted not only physical brutality but also tragic fates that left the families and friends of the women in perpetual sorrow and confusion. These victims were more than just statistics. They were real individuals bursting with dreams and hopes, destroyed by Derek, who left behind a legacy of fear and cynicism. And so, we conclude our story about Derek LaRoche, a narrative that shocked Canada and left a profound mark on society. His actions compel us to reflect on how the darker aspects of human nature can remain unnoticed, hidden behind a facade of charm. We hope this episode has been both captivating and enlightening. How crucial is it to study such situations to prevent their recurrence in the future? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss upcoming episodes. Thank you for joining us. Subscribe so you don't miss new releases.